Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to We Ain't Got No Histories preseason live. This is week 2. We are about to enter week 2. That is, Chelsea kicked off preseason last Monday, and it's rolling on now. I think we're good. And tomorrow, I believe, is the day, or possibly later today, that they are flying out to China to begin the actual tour part of the preseason. There's going to be a game against Arsenal on the 22nd, which should be a Saturday. And then there will be 2 games in Singapore against Bayern Munich and Inter Milan before the squad come home for relax for another week or so. And then we play against Arsenal again in the Community Shield. And then it will be time for the season itself. It's kind of about a month away now, which is kind of concerning considering we have about one able-bodied striker and possibly still short at least one wingback. So that's going to be the main topic for today, is to talk about some more transfer nonsense, transfer excitement, and some transfer concerns. The big thing is we finally completed the signing of Timo. I'm just going to call him Timo because that's what he goes by on his Twitter handle. I don't know if that's how you actually say his first name, but it's so much easier than whatever that might be. So let's call him Tiemoué Bakayoko. 22 years old, from Monaco, central midfielder, sort of a Matić replacement. Much younger than Matić, of course. Possibly not as good or possibly better. Opinions seem to differ. There's a whole wide range of opinions about this young man who managed to string us all along for quite a while, including just before his signing, where he went on a bit of a Twitter troll episode, changing his locations on his tweets and all this sort of nonsense to like Manchester and Heathrow. And at some point, apparently, he did fly back to Monaco after agreeing everything to, say his personal goodbyes. There's a story that later came out that a lot of it possibly had to do with his entourage and all his agents and hangers-on and all these guys who apparently all wanted to cut, and Chelsea got tired of dealing with them, or Bakayoko himself got tired of dealing with it. Long story short, he finally signed and was announced a couple days ago on Saturday, after possibly taking about 25 medicals and flying back and forth. His name is pronounced Chimo. Oh, like Timo. Yeah, I'm not that talented. We're just gonna go with Timo with a hard T, and you're just gonna have to deal with it. Bakayoko, got that part. Or maybe he'll just go by TB14, which I thought was kind of cool. His shirt number is number 14. I kind of assumed he would take the vacant number 8, which Oscar left behind when he went to China. But he took number 14, which is a number he had at Monaco. And apparently that's the number of the district in Paris in which he was born. So that's kind of a nice touch. And, perhaps there's more to the young man than just, Twitter shenanigans and all that kind of nonsense. Afterwards, he said that he obviously looks forward to playing for a big club, all the usual things, winning lots of trophies. Apparently, he likes a lot of trophies. So he came to the right place for that. The most interesting part was possibly him saying that it was Didier Drogba who got him to follow Chelsea in the first place, since they share a heritage of Ivorian heritage. Bakayoko was born in Paris, but he was born to Ivorian parents. So obviously he looks up to the big man. Of course, we all look up to Didier because he is the best. So that was a couple nice touches, kind of make up for all the concerns that we've had for all these weeks now about Bakayoko. And hopefully he should be. Well, actually, I haven't heard if he is flying on the tour. There's some concern about his knee, which we heard about earlier. He might be not really ready for the start of the season. Chelsea seem confident that he will be ready for September, so that would mean that he'd miss the first 3 games. And might be more, might be less. It's a bit of a silly situation to sign a player who might not be able to contribute right away, but it is what it is. So that's the big news of Bakayoko finally agreeing terms and becoming official. On the outgoing side of things, there was plenty of concern once again with Nathaniel Chalobah completing his permanent move to Watford, where there might or might not be a buyback clause. If there isn't one, then it's a bit of a problem because they only paid about $5 million for him. If there is one, then that's fine. It's obviously the best move for Chalobah himself because he wants to play and he thinks he has a better chance of playing at Watford than he does at Chelsea, which may be right, may not be right if Matić goes. I think Chelsea were counting on being able to keep Chalobah around, and that's why we were so possibly willing to sell Matić. A midfield 4 for 2 positions of Kante, Bakayoko, Fabregas, and Chalobah, I think would guarantee plenty of playing time for all 4. Unfortunately, Chalobah himself had other ideas, and so off he went. With a year left on his contract, there was not much that Chelsea could do if he wasn't willing to agree a new contract. Which seems to be the thing we like to do. Some of these older players, such as Marco van Ginkel, went on loan again for whatever reason. The dude's 24. He still is, keeps going on loans. But he extended his contract for another 3 seasons, I believe. Same thing with Lucas Piazon, who went back to Fulham just like last season. He extended his contract as well. And then the other loan move that was confirmed was Ruben Loftus-Cheek, finally getting his first loan move of his career. Hard to believe, being the 21-year-old veteran that he is. But this is the first time he's ever been on loan, and he's going to be at Crystal Palace, which sounds terrible, but is actually probably okay because Crystal Palace are no longer managed by Sam Allardyce, but by Frank de Boer of Ajax and Dutch national team fame. So hopefully, he learns a thing or two and gets himself established at Premier League level, comes back, etc., all the usual stuff. Let's see. So as far as rumors have kind of died away in terms of realistic ones now that we've signed Bakayoko and Rudiger. Possibly the most realistic or the most likely to happen is Danilo. Let's go with Danilo, the Brazilian right back who plays for Real Madrid and possibly not very well. There are, again, much like with Bakayoko, there are plenty of opinions running the full gamut from absolutely terrible to, oh my god, this is pretty exciting. The price for Danilo is around the mid 30 million range euros, so that's Chelsea right there for you, mid 30s. It's got Chelsea written all over it. He's right back, used to play for Porto alongside Alexandro, which is probably not happening at all. He's expected to sign a new contract with Juventus. So Danilo is one to watch. Of course, what everybody wants to talk about really is who cares about Danilo. Let's talk about strikers. Yeah, strikers. Of course, Roy points out we don't have a backup left back, left wing back. Well, we have Kennedy, and he's amazing. No. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We basically don't really have a backup left back or backup right wing back, but in a pinch, Azpilicueta probably can do the job on the right, but we definitely don't really have anybody to play on the left unless Kennedy has grown leaps and bounds in that role, which, possibly suits him, possibly doesn't. Kennedy is young, yes. Yeah, Baba Rahman, as Max points out, we also have him, but he's still recovering from his ACL. And there was a story earlier this summer that that's possibly not going as well as we have hoped. and I wouldn't expect Baba Rahman to contribute at all in the first half of the season, and then do the slow comeback to full fitness. So it's a bit of an issue. Baba Rahman probably could do the job as a backup left wing back, but not this season. Anyway, so strikers. We have Loic Remy, who played in the behind closed doors friendly that Chelsea beat Fulham 8-2. 8-2. That's right. 8-2. Remy scored 2 goals in the second half, but apparently that was probably the last time he's ever going to play for Chelsea, as he's linked with a return to France, a permanent move back to possibly Lille, although there was another rumor that said Everton might buy him. I don't know why Everton would ever want to buy him. But so if Remy goes, we are literally down to one striker in Matić Batshuayi. Diego Costa is off in Brazil, partying it up in his Atletico shirts and sending snide remarks to Cesc Fabregas on Instagram. At least we're assuming they're snide comments. Perhaps he truly means to send his regards and his hugs to Antonio Conte, but I think it's safe to err on the side of drunk Diego Costa saying mean things and trollish things on Instagram. So Costa's out at some point. Eventually, Batshuayi played really well in that preseason friendly against Fulham, but it's a preseason friendly against Fulham. And even if he did score 2 goals and collected 2 assists, that's not something that really should make him our first choice striker at this point. He's perfect for a backup striker, and hopefully that will indeed be the case. But it's quite clearly we need to sign somebody to be the big man up front, or the quick man up front. In the case of Aubameyang, who seems to be the front runner, I'd say. And it's tough to tell. This seems to change day by day, or depending on who AC Milan happened to sign at the time, because they seem to be signing everybody and anybody. They possibly read our summer transfer notebook, because about half of those guys have ended up at AC Milan, which is not cool for us and pretty cool for them, assuming they don't get smacked down by some financial, fair play restrictions eventually when they do make it back to Europe. Obviously, they're not in Europe right now, so actually I don't think FFP applies to them at the moment. But as soon as they're back in Europe, then they're going to have to comply with those regulations. And I don't know how they plan on doing that, but who knows? The problem is every striker that we've been linked with is outrageously expensive, and that includes Lukaku, on whom we missed out. He possibly is now the world's most expensive player. The official transfer fee was £75 million, but there are some add-ons that are sure to trigger, and then possibly they raise their bid at the last minute because of Chelsea's supposed last-minute bid as well. So it's probably costing them well over £90 million. That's an outrageous amount of money to get Lukaku to Manchester United. Obviously, he's pretty good. I don't know if we can criticize him for many different things. And if you watched his debut for United in the friendly against LA Galaxy, I'm sure you felt a lot better about Chelsea missing out on him, because he did all the things that he's been criticized for many, many times, including having terrible first touches and sending his shots to the moon. And hilariously enough, in the post-match press conference, Mourinho was talking about, of course we'd welcome Zlatan back after spending £90 million on Romelu Lukaku. So there you go. There's Mourinho's 10-minute assessment of Romelu Lukaku. So anyway, that's not Chelsea, that's United, and who cares about them at the moment. For Chelsea right now, Aubameyang seems to be the realistic option. Realistic in as much insofar as they might actually sell him. The Dortmund chairman, I think they have chairman or president, whatever, he actually gave a series of quotes where he said we have about a week to actually submit a bid, because of course in true classic Chelsea style there are lots of rumors, but there are no actual bids that we know of. So the Dortmund chairman said you have a week to bid for Aubameyang, and then we're done with this charade, and we gotta start preparing for the season. So there you go. Chelsea have a week to bid for Aubameyang, somewhere in the range of, again, 65 to, stratosphere, pounds, euros, millions, doesn't really matter. If Chelsea do sign a leading striker this summer, he's almost guaranteed to be a club record signing. Aubameyang, 65. The Torino striker Andrea Belotti, his buyout is 100 million euros. AC Milan are supposedly really going for him, and they've offered like 2 players in exchange plus 60 million or 80 million or who knows. Agüero. Yes, so beyond all those guys, and there's of course Morata at Real Madrid. The big rumor yesterday was that Sergio Agüero is... What was the word they were using? That Chelsea want? I didn't... Yes, the rumor is that Chelsea want to sign Sergio Agüero, and bonus, Pep Guardiola has already given his okay to the operation of Chelsea wanting to sign Agüero. The big caveat to all this, of course, is the City chairman at the end of the season said that there's no way in hell they're selling Agüero this summer. They have not signed another striker this summer. They've been linked with Alexis Sanchez. He's not really a striker. So it's a hopeful rumor, and it's of course from a Spanish source special. The journalist who came up with this, his name is Matić. He writes for Diario AS and is on Spanish radio. Not exactly the greatest, most confidence-inducing resume for Mr. Matić to make his rumor believable. The other problem, of course, with just as the other 3 options that have been we've been talking about forever. Agüero, the last time anybody put a price on Agüero, it was 75 million pounds, and that was back during the season when there were some clear issues between him and Guardiola. Eventually, they seemed to work through all that, much like Conte and Costa did, and Agüero scored north of 30 goals. So, he is 29 years old. Are you going to spend 75 million pounds on a 29-year-old when you can spend 100 million euros on a 23-year-old? It's tough decisions. Obviously, Agüero is well proven, and when he's not injured with hamstring or whatever other troubles he tends to have, he's one of the best, if not the best, Premier League goal scorer. So Agüero is 29. I assure you, I looked it up. I think he turned 29 earlier this summer. So there you go. 28, 29 doesn't really matter that much. It's a lot of money to spend on somebody in his late 20s. Not to be ageist or anything. It's one of the bigger issues with Aubameyang as well. I keep thinking that he's in his early 20s, but he's been around for a while, and he's 28 or something like that. So 65 million on a 28-year-old. That's not as cool. Lewandowski, 80 million. Yeah, I don't think he's for sale though. That's not really an option. Do you see us going 4 at the back? Asks Eric. Judging by the first preseason game, I think we're going to go with the same formation as before, the 3-4-3, and it would really not surprise me if we basically line up with the same group of players as a 3-4-3 that finished out the season. So in that preseason game against Fulham, basically Conte started the strongest lineup possible against poor old Fulham, who didn't really know what hit him, and it was 5-1 by the half. So we played Caballero in goal. Courtois was missing for whatever reason, as were Andreas Christensen and Charlie Musonda. Some people were a bit concerned about that, but I think it's pretty safe to say that those two are in the team as of right now. So, I'm not sure why they didn't play, but I am not really sure. It's a concerning thing. The back three that started the game was the back three we've come to know and love last season: Cahill, David Luiz, and Azpilicueta. Alonso, Moses on the wings. Middle two of Conte and Fabregas. Fabregas had a really good half, playing a lot of deep lying playmaker based on the highlights. Nobody's seen the full game, I don't think. And then we had a front three of Willian, Batshuayi, and Pedro. And then a whole bunch of changes were in the second half, and that was interesting as well. Jeremy Boga got a run out, which is always exciting. We used to think he would be amazing one day, and maybe one day he still will be. Why not bury the hatchet with Costa and find a way to work around his antics? Asks Arif Ali Khan. Well, there was one rumor. Unfortunately, it was from the Sun. So yeah, that's probably not happening. But there was that one rumor that there might be trying to reconcile, and that's assuming that after sending Costa a text from Conte that nobody's denied yet. So we're gonna have to assume that this text actually did happen. Sending a text that said, "You're not in my plans for next season. Thanks for the season, though." And then after all the forcing a transfer this way, one way or the other, Costa saying he's not going to go anywhere but Atletico, then being excused from preseason, then being excused from the tour of Asia. If they manage to reconcile after all that, I mean, that's a Nobel Peace Prize worthy operation for whoever manages to engineer that. So yeah, and then that was before last night's shenanigans from Costa partying it up in his hometown in Brazil, hopping on Instagram Live, showing off his Atletico shirt, his old Atletico shirt. In fairness, I'm sure he has a closet full of them, and telling Cesc Fabregas to give Conte a hug for him, either seriously or jokingly. If he meant it seriously, maybe there's hope. If he meant it jokingly, then same as it ever was. Yes, Remy's leaving. I think we can assume that. Batshuayi. I mean, it would be a pretty cool story if Mitić grabbed this chance with both hands and continued. He ended the season in really good form, scoring in almost every game that he played. Finally, he played, right? So, and if he repaid all those minutes with goals. And maybe Mitić's gonna rise to be the hero that we need and the hero that we deserve. That would be a nice story, and it also actually would really validate some of the club's transfer planning, which tends to not get any credit at all. Mostly because not all the moves work out. To be generous, but signing Batshuayi last summer for 30+ million seems like a bad move so far because he's barely ever played. But if suddenly he becomes our first choice striker in a market where all the other available first choice strikers are twice the amount that he cost, then that's pretty good validation right there. But maybe I'm being too hopeful. Lewis Baker. Yes. So after all the midfield shakes out and all that, with Chalba leaving, Matić probably leaving, we're down to 3 midfielders at the moment for the central midfield, so that means we need at least one more. And Lewis Baker could actually quite reasonably be the beneficiary of all that. I think it was assumed that he would go on loan, possibly to Swansea before Swansea got Tammy Abraham, possibly Bournemouth or wherever. Lots of choices left still in the Premier League. But now that we need a striker, maybe or another midfielder, maybe Baker's the one to stay. Of course, he played as a one of the wide forwards in that preseason friendly, but maybe we shouldn't look into that too much. The two midfielders that played after Conte and Fabregas were youngster Kyle Scott, the American USA. The American Kyle Scott and the soon-to-be leaving, probably young 22-year-old, I think he is also, Mario Pasalic. I'm sure I'm not saying his name right because I don't know how to pronounce Croatian, but he is the young loan returnee from AC Milan who wanted to go to AC Milan, but that was before they came into a lot of money and adjusted their sights a little higher. So now young Mario has been back with the team with Chelsea training, and he played half the game against Fulham, and perhaps he's going on the tour. So maybe one of these guys can slide into that fourth role that Chalobah has vacated. Which players get your vote for captain and vice captain? Asks Albert. Well, I think we're keeping Cahill as the captain, and I don't think it necessarily matters even if he gets dropped for Rudiger eventually. We theoretically or technically we kept John Terry as captain last season, and he barely played, so I don't think it necessarily matters for who is the club captain. The on-pitch captain, obviously will be whoever is next in line after Cahill, and I think that is Azpilicueta. And then after Azpilicueta, it's David Luiz is the pecking order that I'm seeing. And I wholeheartedly support that because Captain Dave needs to be a thing going forward until his retirement. Because everybody loves Dave. And if you don't love Dave, and I'd really like to hear your nuanced argument as to why you don't love Dave. What position does Pasalic play? He is a midfielder. That's all I know, really. He is not. I wouldn't consider him a defensive midfielder. He's more of the attacking type, but not somebody who's going to dribble through, half the team. So, controller, creator, passer. That sort of a young midfielder. He started almost every game for AC Milan in the second half of the season, and that's, AC Milan were a little worse then than they are now, or they're set to be now, but that's still not a bad accomplishment for, top half of the table Serie A team. So there's, and he's excelled or shown well in his two previous loans as well, when he spent a season at Monaco before getting hurt. He hurt his back, I think it was. And then the season before then, he was in La Liga with Elche. And Elche went down, I think, or got relegated, but Pasalic played pretty well. And that was when he was like 19 and playing, top-tier professional football in Spain. So the kid's got plenty of talent. Whether we're willing to give that spot to him or give it to Lewis Baker. We are quite short of homegrown players on the squad right now. Homegrown, of course, is not a quota that is often gets confused for. It's not like you have to have homegrown players in the team, but you can only have 17 non-homegrown players. So that means you have 7 open spots on the team or in a squad list that has to be submitted to the Premier League that is basically free to be filled with homegrown players. So that's why it was nice to have somebody like Begovic as your backup who didn't take up a non-homegrown spot and could be basically a free addition to the team. Now we have Caballero, who obviously does take up that spot. So that kind of is a less ideal situation. It probably won't really affect the Premier League squad because we can just rotate people out or whatever. But for the Champions League, we probably won't submit Eduardo as part of the Champions League squad and roll with somebody like Jamal Blackman, who had been on Champions League squads for Chelsea many times now, purely because of that reason, because we need a third goalkeeper on there who's homegrown. So in that sense, somebody like Lewis Baker gets the advantage over Pasalic, who I don't think qualifies as homegrown, although some of the loan rules kind of make that a little weird, so maybe he does. Charlie Musonda needs a chance before Hazard gets back. I fully agree. I think Charlie Musonda got squad number 17, which seems to indicate for now that he's staying with the team instead of going out on loan. So, and with Hazard out, that should give him an extra chance or two to show what he's got in a real Premier League game, which could be exciting. Kingsley asks, update on Sandro. Alex Sandro, I think we can safely rule out Alex Sandro ever coming to Chelsea. And by ever, I mean this season. I'm sure we'll be back here where we started next season. There was, after Chelsea bid 40, 50, 60, and then 70 million euros for him. This is all based on rumors, so maybe you never bid at all. You can never really tell. After we bid 70 million, at least one of these bids was confirmed by Juventus. So there was something there. After the 70 million bid was considered for a while, we heard a rumor that Juventus raised their price to 75, to which Chelsea responded with an improved bid of unknown amount. It was 70 plus other considerations, possibly bonuses, stuff like that. Long story short, Juventus rejected that as well now, and Alex Sandro is expected to sign a new contract with Juventus, which is a contract that has been on the table for the last few weeks. Gives him a healthy raise. It doesn't give him the amount of money that he would have earned at Chelsea, but all along this was probably just a play for a better contract, which it often is, and Chelsea often get used in such manner because we have the money and the desire and the ambition to sign such players, usually, but more often than not, they're just going for a new contract, and Chelsea are being used by agents and other such entities to put pressure on a club to submit a better offer. Update on Matić, asks Gerald. As far as we know, Matić is going to be leaving. The latest rumor is that he's not going on the tour of Asia, and unlike Hazard, who's injured, or he's back to running now, but he's still injured, he's going to be a while, and unlike Costa, who is partying in Brazil, Matić is actually at Cobham at Chelsea. There was a really awkward selfie that Bakayoko took with him. It was like one of the first pictures he took as a Chelsea player, was a selfie with the guy he's probably replacing. So that's pretty awkward. But Matić isn't going on the tour, and if he's not going on the tour, I mean, that's as clear an indication as we'll ever get that he's going to be sold. The only issue, or the only real mystery there, is who's he going to be sold to. Manchester United keep being brought up, and supposedly he wants to join Manchester United because of Mourinho. At this point, we'd be pretty foolish to sell to anybody in the Premier League if there is supposedly interest on him from like Italy. Juventus and Inter have been mentioned. The two Premier League teams who are supposedly interested are Manchester United and Arsenal, and we'd be pretty silly to sell to both or either. And surely our supposed asking price is 40 million for Matić, which seems a bit much to me. Not that I don't rate Matić, but he's a 28-year-old midfielder, and as inflated as the transfer market may be, 40 million seems rather hopeful. So possibly we could lower it to 30 or whatever and sell him to a non-Premier League team, and I think that would be a pretty decent solution to this whole thing. Who needs Sancho when you have Kennedy? Well, Kennedy featured heavily in the second half highlights of that preseason friendly against Fulham. He gave away a penalty, and then he set up a goal for Remy. So, bit of good in both, bit of good and bad from Kennedy. I do like Kennedy, but the dude came here as like a goal scoring winger, attacking winger / striker, and somehow 3 coaches now have played him as a left back or a left wing back, which seems like, I mean, I know we did that with Moses as well, and that's turned out pretty well. But, Mourinho fielded him as left back, and then Hiddink did the same, and now Conte's been doing it as well. So, I mean, it's a pretty interesting transition for Kennedy, in his early 20s. You see that sort of transition fairly often in youth teams. Like I remember Jose Bosingwa was a famous example of this. He was an attacking winger when he was growing up, and then he became a attacking right back. Let's put it that way. Not much for defending. Good old Bosingwa. And somebody like Makalele did a transition as well, or Mikel even. Attack from attacking midfield to defensive midfield. So it's not entirely unheard of. It's just seems like Kennedy's doing it at a bit later age than it normally happens. Why did AC Milan not go for Matić? I think it's because they signed a whole bunch of other midfielders, including that young guy from Atalanta called Frank Kessié, who was supposedly linked with Chelsea back in January. So I think they're signing younger, more promising players, so to say. Matić is basically at his peak or possibly on his way down, and that's not what Milan are doing. Seemingly, they seem to be signing a lot of younger players. Any update on where Matt Miazga next loan might be? Asks Anthony. We have not heard anything from Matt Miazga. What we do know is he's probably not going back to Vitesse. He did really well there, and the idea is to look for a better or more challenging loan for him than top half of Eredivisie. Good old Matt Miazga scored a goal for the Team USA in the Gold Cup final group game that got him the group win. So that was exciting against Nicaragua, I want to say. But yeah, Matt Miazga doing, this is a dark horse candidate for you, possibly becoming a really good player in the future. But we'll see. That might be a little hopeful. Let's get Mendy, says Roy. Is that Benjamin Mendy, I'm assuming. Left back, teammate of Bakayoko's. I think Mendy is going to end up at Manchester City. That seems to be the narrative. I don't know. He put Mendy tweeted something out yesterday or 2 days ago. Just put yesterday's date on it, and then I'm not even sure if anything happened of this supposed big date. He tweeted out 16/7/17, so July 16/17, and I haven't really heard if anything actually did happen on 16/7. So he's just, everybody from Monaco seems to be quite well up on their troll game on Twitter, and we only have Batshuayi to combat them. But fortunately, Mitić is pretty good at Twitter as well. Club should add Benteke. He's a good goal scorer. Yeah, the problem with Benteke, and it's the same problem with Llorente, is that they're both backups. If they come to Chelsea, they're backup level signings. And I mean, I guess that's not a problem if you think that Mitić can carry the load as the first choice striker. But the common or the accepted narrative, whatever, seems to be that Mitić is going to be backup, and we need somebody to be the first choice striker as the de facto Costa replacement. And if we're bringing in Benteke to be our first choice striker, I think we're going to be in a world of hurt. Unless he can truly rediscover that one season when he was really good. Mendy always seems to be on the cusp of signing for City. Yeah, that's right. He's their Bakayoko. They've been signing him for about a month. You know, which is always funny. People complain about Chelsea can't get signings over the line, and it always takes us forever. But I'm fairly confident that this is an issue that a lot of other teams having, especially when there's this much money involved. Nothing's going to be simple. Nothing's going to be easy. Everybody has like 20 agents and PR people, and everybody's got to get paid, and everything has to be sorted out. Rare is the transfer like Bonucci's shock move from Juventus to Milan, which seemingly happened in about 12 hours, or Chelsea's signing of David Luiz last season on transfer deadline day, or a day before transfer deadline day, which also seemed to happen about 12 hours. So I think those are the exceptions, and the rule is every transfer takes forever and ever and ever, and all these little details and image rights and all this nonsense that we never hear about, they got to be sorted out. And then everybody threatens tapping up. If you don't want to sell somebody, you say, you're tapping up. Thanks, Southampton. How about Giroud? He's available. I think the only positive about Giroud being available is that he might go somewhere from where we can sign a good striker. Like I heard that he might go to Dortmund, or if we sign Aubameyang, which is fine by me. In that sense, if we're signing Giroud, we're in the Benteke situation, and I don't think that's a good situation to be in. Never get Benteke, go for Belotti. It's hard because he has one good season and no experience in English football. Yeah, Belotti definitely, he passes the eye test and he passes the stats test, and he seems to have the right attitude and everything. And Torino might even be persuaded to sell. Certainly there is a buyout clause, so if Chelsea were to fork up 100 million euros, Torino have to accept the offer, and then at that point it becomes, can we convince Belotti to leave Torino, which I'm assuming we could if we throw some money at him. I'm not sure how loyal he might be to Torino. He certainly seems destined for bigger things. Not that Torino is not a big club or whatever, second team in Turin. But he's got the talent to play for a Champions League contender. So if he sees that situation, wants to leave, etc., etc. But you never know. We were told that Alexandro possibly wanted to leave Juventus, and that seems to not be the case at all. So it's the trouble with transfer rumors. Any explanation as to why Mbappe hadn't been spoken about? Well, I don't know. It's a good question. It seems to be an assumed outcome that he's going to end up be at Real Madrid this season or next season. I think I think that's why I think we kind of also know that if we're not willing to pay 100 million for Belotti, we're not going to pay 130 million for Mbappe, however good he might be. Here's Belotti, who, the big strike against him that he's never played in the Premier League, and he's only really had one good season, and he's 23 or whatever. And then you have Mbappe, who's 18 or 19, and literally only had one good season. He's been highly rated prospect for a while, but he's only had one good season, and he's never played outside of League One. He played Champions League football, obviously, but small sample. So he's really good in League One, and League One seems to be on the up and up as far as reputation of players coming out of there are concerned. Certainly Conte did the league plenty of favor in showing that some of the cheaper signings from there can be amazing. Lacazette just went to Arsenal for 50 plus, which is amazing. It's an amazing price to pay for somebody who's really, do people, I know a lot of Lyon fans think he's amazing, but is Lacazette really that good? 52 million for it's craziness these days. Craziness. Excuse me. Is Danilo still gonna happen? Reports out of Brazil said that we've agreed personal terms, which, take with a grain of salt as usual, but that seems to be a good first step. And then we're talking about a mid-30s transfer, which again suits Chelsea quite well. There was an initial report of Chelsea being okay at 31 million euros. And then Real Madrid supposedly won 35. Now Danilo supposedly asked Real to lower the price. At the start of the transfer window, he was linked with Juventus, and the price then was only 20 million. So obviously that move didn't happen, so maybe that price was a little too low. But that's quite a jump from 20 million to 35 million as far as asking price goes. So, maybe we can do a deal for Danilo a little cheaper than 35. On the other hand, maybe it's time to stop mucking around with transfer fees and just pay the man, pay the fee, and get it done. Why are we showing no ambition with buying the top stars? We have spare cash from the Oscar cash. This is James. Yeah, by our count, we should have plenty of money sitting around, so it's unclear if it's a principle thing, like we don't want to pay that much, because, it sets a precedent. But even if we don't want to do that, the precedent's been set by the other teams, United obviously have no problem paying 70, 80, 90 million for a top player. They've signed Lindelof as well for 30 plus million, with whom we were linked when Mourinho was here. Who else did they sign? City obviously have no issues. They paid 50 million for Bernardo Silva. Arsenal just paid 50 million for Lacazette. So I mean, it's Chelsea can sit on their principles, but it's a new reality. Is you have to spend money, and so we got the 60 million for Oscar. We didn't get any money for Costa out of China, which possibly was part of the plan. The other explanation is that we're somehow saving money for the stadium thing, which is set to start at some point in the next 2 years, and we haven't really heard any word on how it's going to be financed. The assumption is that Abramovich is going to pay for it all, which is a pretty generous assumption. He's poured well over £1 billion into the club over the last however many 14 years now. So I mean, he has no problem spending money on the club, but spending another 500 to 700 to £1 billion on a stadium seems like a pretty generous donation again from the owner. So possibly there is some sort of financing that needs to be sorted out and all that. I've seen that idea bandied about a little bit, in that Chelsea might be staying conservative in the market because of the upcoming expenses for stadium and stuff like that. Even though the stadium build, I don't think counts into the financial fair play calculations. So, it's all, if we can secure external financing or Abramovich financing, then it's all basically free money as far as FFP is concerned. Yeah, Chelsea not a charity organization. That's the principle side of things, right? We always hear, or often hear, of if Chelsea haggling over 2-3 odd amounts of millions, when it's just pay the extra 5 million and call it good. But if you set that precedent, then other teams can keep continuing to try to get more money out of you, I guess. And every little bit adds up. And as we know, with the loan army and all the youngsters, we definitely see the advantage of getting small amounts of income from various players and paying for the club's expenses. Is Courtois going to sign an extension? Yes, he is supposed to sign an extension at some point. As much as we finally made a bit of progress in our transfers in getting Rudiger and Bakayoko, we've seemingly made no progress whatsoever on getting contract extensions out to people, and that's mostly Courtois, Conte, and then Hazard was also rumored as well, even though Hazard still has 3 years left on his current contract. So there's really not been any rumors. Obviously, everybody's been on vacation, so the club did say, basically through the usual outlets in the Telegraph and all those places, that basically all contract talks were on hold in June while everybody was on holidays. But now everybody's been back for about a week, and surely it doesn't take that much to iron out a contract or two. Certainly, I would expect Courtois to sign a contract pretty soon, and then hopefully Conte does the same and puts an end to these nonsense stories from the likes of the Sun about him getting upset with our transfer policy again, even though we just signed Bakayoko. So at some point you got to be happy with the transfers, man. Like you know what you signed up for. Don't be that guy who walks away. That's all I'm saying. Conte did actually, in positive signs, to allay any fears that the Sun and all those guys might try to stir up, he did get 2 new staff members this week. There was a tactical video analyst or something like that, and I forget his name, unfortunately. It starts with Davide something or other. He is an analyst who came in, and then we got a new coach for the first team, Paolo Vanoli, who used to be a former left back for Parma, when Parma were really good, actually. So he was a pretty decent player, apparently. And then he had been the under-19 head coach for the Italian national team. And then last season, after Conte left the Italian national team, and his successor, Ventura, I think is the dude's name, he was named as a new head coach for Italy. This guy was his assistant, and now he's a Chelsea coach, and he's been spotted at training with his monogrammed tracksuit. Oh, excuse me. The monogrammed tracksuit and everything. So I think it's safe to assume that he's in the fold. Possibly his youth experience is going to be put to use to make the first team more youth friendly. A look on the perhaps that's hopeful thinking once again. Who do you see Chelsea signing as striker? Well, trouble is, I can't really see any real evidence of Chelsea wanting to spend as much money as it would be required to get any of the top 3 or 4 names that we are constantly linked with. Morata is 90 million is the price, supposedly 90 million euros. Belotti is 100 million euros. Aubameyang is at least 65 million pounds, and Agüero is at least as much, if not more, because the dude's a goal machine. And of course, Aubameyang is a goal machine too, but he's not a goal machine in the Premier League. So, you get the Premier League tax on Agüero, and you get the rivals tax, if he's at all even available. And if we want to put Alexis Sanchez in this category, his price supposedly is 90 million as well, which is supposedly what Arsenal quoted Manchester City after, or before actually, Alexis went in front of the TV cameras in Chile where he was on vacation. And he said that he is basically done with Arsenal. He made his decision to leave. He wants to play in the Premier League, and now it's Arsenal's turn to grant his transfer. So he might be leaving, he might not be leaving. That's kind of still the same story as it ever has been. But that Arsenal aren't going to let him go for cheap. And much like us with Matić, they would certainly prefer to sell not to the Premier League. Comment on signing Chicharito. I do love Chicharito. He's amazing. He's an amazing striker, really, for what he does. His role as a poacher. He's you know, it's a bold statement. I don't claim to know every player in the world, but he certainly is the best I've ever seen since Pippo Inzaghi back in the olden days in the Serie A golden years. Inzaghi was amazing, and Chicharito is similarly amazing at finding goals and poaching goals from seemingly nowhere and being in the right place at the right time, which is often said to be a quality, an unteachable quality, and something we've seen sometimes with Costa, but he tends to drop off far too much to be called a real poacher. We've actually seen a fair amount with Tammy Abraham when he was on loan last season at Bristol City. Almost all his goals, if not all his goals, came from like the 6-yard area or the from the penalty spot in. So he's certainly somebody who operates in the tiny spaces in the penalty area, and that's a skill that's often acquired through just intuition and practice and things like that. So, but Tammy Abraham is not an option for this season. He's already been sent to Swansea. So hopefully maybe he's an option for next season if he develops along the lines as we expect. But this is Chelsea, so really banking on a youth player, especially somebody we groom through the academy, brought him up from 8 years old or however old he was when he joined, and now he's certainly one of the best young strikers in all of England. And still, it's nowhere near guaranteed that he's ever going to get a real chance at Chelsea, which in a way is sad, and in a way it's the reality of top level Premier League football, where there's no room for error, really. I'll be so pissed off if we end up with Llorente, says James. I don't know. I better start making your peace with it. I think Llorente. There's not much chatter about Llorente, but if I were a betting man, I'd put a decent amount of money on Llorente ending up at Chelsea, possibly on the final day of the transfer window when we're scrambling around and hoping for a signing to keep Batshuayi company. Do you think we will get someone for the right wing? Asked Steve. Based on rumors so far, probably not. I'm not sure we've been linked with anybody who might consider, other than, Sanchez, but, that seems somewhat unrealistic, to put it mildly. I guess we were linked off and on with James Rodriguez, but he signed on loan with Bayern Munich, so it's a nice sweetheart deal that old Uncle Carlo got out of Real Madrid, right? Here's this world superstar on loan for 2 years. Have fun. So that's good. Good for Ancelotti. Not so good for the rest of us. So we were linked with James a little bit. Who else was here? Riyad Mahrez keeps popping up. There's a rumor that he agreed personal terms with Roma, who Roma obviously need a replacement for Salah, who went to Liverpool. And then Leicester City quoted them 50 million euros for Riyad Mahrez, at which point I'm sure that's incredibly silly and nobody's going to sign Mahrez for 50 million euros. We were briefly linked with Perisic from Inter, but he's possibly going to Manchester United if he's going anywhere. So I'm not sure we can expect anybody on the right wing. Magnificent George, Dembele would cost less than 45 million and fits Chelsea perfectly. I'm assuming we're talking about Moussa Dembele, and I would be very much on the Moussa Dembele hype train if there was any inkling of us signing him, which is unfortunate that we're not. So maybe we're working on a secret deal. We were linked with him in January when he was at Celtic. He's still at Celtic. and in January his price was supposedly 40 million euros, which seemed excessive at the time, but I think that was before we saw the realities of the summer market, in which 40 million is almost your standard player price. 40 million euros. If you're any good these days and you're under, I don't know, 24, 25, your standard price is 40 million. It used to be 10 million, it used to be 20 million, and now it's 40 million. That's your opening bid for any player is 40 million. It's ridiculous. But Dembele is certainly seems to be somebody who is going to be in the upper stratosphere in a couple of years, possibly as soon as he leaves Celtic, because it'd be pretty tough to charge more than 40 million for somebody out of the Scottish Premier League. But Dembele seems to be the real deal, despite all his surroundings, all the physical tools, all the mental tools. So I think that would be a pretty exciting and pretty interesting signing. And it would probably be pretty concerning for many, given that he's the same age as Tammy Abraham, or a little bit older maybe. But Chelsea would be in possession, would have 3 players at that point, under 25, who could conceivably grow into featured strikers in Dembele, Abraham, and Michy Batshuayi. All in, this is just all speculation and pretty baseless. There was one throwaway rumor. Yeah, there was last week. Somebody said that Chelsea are still tracking Moussa Dembele. Whatever tracking means is we're doing it. Put him on your short list in Football Manager and see how he develops. How do you think the homegrown quota is going to be filled? Am I right to be worried? Asks Joe Jose Woodcock. I think we're not going to fill the homegrown quota. I don't really see how we're going to do it. We're down to, I think it's 3 players. Cahill, Fabregas, and Moses, I think, are our 3 homegrown players at this point. And that's it. It's anybody we pull up from the youth team to be this season's crop of Loftus-Cheek, Chalobah, Aina, to sit on the bench and make up numbers. Those guys don't enter into the homegrown, non-homegrown equation. They're just going to be under 21s, and so they're free squad spots for them. So I think we're going to have to end up rolling with the 17 non-homegrown and the 3 homegrown players. This homegrown rule is really the only reason rumors like Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain make sense. If he's unhappy, his contract is winding down at Arsenal too, and if they don't offer him a new contract, maybe he's unhappy and willing to move. But that once again would rely on Arsenal selling to a rival, and they seem to be adamant, very much adamant this year that they're going to stop doing that. So we'll see if any of that would ever happen. Somebody like Virgil van Dijk would be an interesting addition in that, but unless you want to get trumped up on tapping up charges, I think you best steer clear of Southampton these days. Dortmund Dembele, yeah, he would be a good right wing as well. Yes, as would the great American hope Christian Pulisic. How do you say his name in an American way? But I don't think either of those players are anywhere near a transfer to Chelsea. So those are pretty fancy signings at this point. I don't think if all the positions, wing at this point should be fairly low on the priority list. We're set at center back, we're set at goalkeeper. And we're set on the wings as wide forwards with Hazard. Even if he's injured, he'll be back. Willian and Pedro. That's still a very good trio. And then we have Musonda in the wings, and he needs an opportunity certainly to show what he's got. So there's 4 players. Certainly we keep somebody else around from the loan army or whoever. There's lots of tremendous talent in in the academy who can sub in for a league cup game or whatever. So I don't think attacking wing should be a place where we spend time and effort to sign somebody, unless we come across a really good deal or an unmissable prospect, such as Dortmund's Dembele. I'm sure many will tell you he's unmissable. Or Pulisic, I've heard similar things. Ryan Bertrand would help us with the homegrown quota, right? Yes, and I think Ryan Bertrand is highly desired by teams like Chelsea and Manchester City precisely because of the homegrown quota. I know a lot of people like Ryan Bertrand, but I love Ryan Bertrand just because he's sort of kind of a Chelsea Academy graduate. I think he joined when he was 17, something like that. But it looked like he'd be the first one since John Terry to make that leap, and he even got about a season under when it was the AVB Benitez season. He actually got a fair amount of playing time, or Di Matteo Benitez. Bertrand got a decent amount of playing time after getting that surprise start in the Champions League final. And he wasn't impressive enough, unfortunately, and Azpilicueta became left back under Mourinho. So, understandably, Bertrand wanted to move on. I mean, he's good, but the prices that we would have to pay to get Bertrand just to have a homegrown left back to rotate with Alonso seems a bit excessive. At that point, give Jay Da Silva a squad number and put him in there for League Cup games. And there you go. If not Sandro, then who? Yeah, it's a good question, unfortunately. And unless we make a late bid for Mendy here, Benjamin Mendy, our options seem to be dwindling quite a bit at left back. I don't know if Danilo's ever capable of playing left back. Maybe he can somehow go over there. Probably not. So, Kennedy it is. Rise, Sir Kennedy, the backup left back we need. Should be worried that Courtois is still not signed a new contract. Not yet. The summer's still long. Courtois is off watching Wimbledon and having fun in the USA and making tabloid headlines. So he's good. He's good. Right wing back needs strengthening, says Charles McNeil. Moses good enough. I think Moses is good enough, but he definitely needs a proper backup. And I don't think Azpilicueta is the proper backup because he's needed in central defense, at least the way I'm looking at things. So that's where Danilo's signing makes some sense. It seems excessive to spend 30 million plus on a backup, but then if we're gonna give Moses proper competition, then I think Danilo is good enough for that. So yeah, that's where we stand. It's not necessarily ideal. Kurt Zouma is somebody you haven't mentioned. He is apparently agreed a move to Stoke City, a loan move to Stoke City. I have not seen that confirmed yet. Who else? Mason Mount, who just won the under-19 Euros with England. He is supposedly closing in on his loan to Vitesse. Mason Mount is a name to keep in mind for the next couple years. He's the next verified gem of the academy, who's set for 6 seasons out on loan, and then off to Watford he goes. Fabregas will stay, right? Yes, I think Fabregas is staying. There's not even any rumors linking him anywhere anymore. Fabregas is Chelsea to the core these days. What about Christensen? I think the assumption is that Christensen is staying. There's certainly no rumors claiming otherwise. And the only concern would be that he did not play in that friendly the other day against Fulham. But I think that's just other people needed to play, basically. Him and Musonda and Courtois all missed, and I don't think that means that either one of them is leaving. It just is, I don't know, a curiosity. Moses had a great season, but he's not the player to take us to the next level, says Felix. Well, yeah. Well, there was a time when Moses was amazing, and the problem is that he was amazing at the start of the season when he started playing right wing back, and then he slowly kind of faded away. And he also got injured. He picked up a toe injury in the spring, which never quite healed, and then he had surgery on it after the season. So I think all of that contributed, and of course he had a terrible FA Cup final, and that kind of put a sour note on not just his season but Chelsea's season overall. So it's, he ended on a sour note, but I think Moses at one point was amazing, and I would not be entirely concerned if he was our starting right wing back next season. I would be concerned if we didn't have a backup for him, a proper backup, which we don't at the moment. Any info on Conte's new contract? Asked Albert. No. Yeah, there was just some random story from The Sun that Conte is once again getting upset with blah, 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 blah. But, yeah, maybe that's putting pressure back on Chelsea or whatever. We've been busy trying to sign players, and we've heard of no progress as far as contract extensions go. And we certainly need to wrap up Conte and Courtois, and then possibly Hazard as well. As we mentioned earlier, Conte did get 2 new staff members this week, so I think that's a pretty good sign that he is not going anywhere. The club would not be signing 2 new staff members for him if there was really any danger of him leaving before the start of the season. That's not to say he's not going to leave. He's walked out on 2 teams before. But, if he does it for a third time, maybe he would acquire a rather negative reputation. So, perhaps it's not a wise move from Conte's perspective either. How many years remaining on Pedro's contract? This is an excellent question, and I don't know that off the top of my head. I'd say maybe 2. He came 2 years ago, right? Let's see what Transfermarkt says. Nope, 2 years. Okay, so he only signed a 4-year contract. So yeah, there's certainly no rumblings of a Pedro contract extension, which makes sense. He is 29, going on 30 in about 11 days. He will be 30. So the 30 is the magic number as far as Chelsea contract extensions go. So if he is to sign a multi-year extension, he has 11 days to do it. After that, we only give 1-year contracts. We saw that pretty strictly adhered to on both sides, in that we gave Cahill his 5-year extension like 3 days before he turned 30 last year. So, Pedro, 2 more years. I would guess he will not see out those 2 years at Chelsea, but maybe he will. Maybe we'll keep signing him to 1-year contracts, and then... although I guess he spoke of wanting to go back to Barcelona and Spain at some point, which makes sense. Pedro, gotta love Pedro and his enthusiasm, but he's only here. He's only here for a few years. Don't get too attached. Do I think Pasalic can be convinced to stay? Conte, Timo, Fab, and him would be great for the season. Yeah, I think Pasalic or Baker could certainly do the job of a 4th midfielder. They're certainly good enough. I don't know if we can be convinced. I think Baker could be convinced. Less positive about Pasalic, but maybe he is. Maybe we don't really hear much from him. We often hear Baker talking to the media, whatever. Nobody really knows what Pasalic is thinking. But he is with the team right now and training and playing, so maybe there's a out of left field option, to use an American baseball term. Anyway, I think we've been here for a little over an hour. Call it a day for another week. Next up will be Chelsea going to tour of Asia. I believe they're leaving either late on Monday or early Tuesday to fly to China. There's going to be a game against Arsenal on Saturday, the 22nd, and then they go to Singapore to play Bayern Munich and Inter. So we're probably going to have, well, we're definitely going to have one of these next week again. And maybe if something big happens in the meantime, we'll do another little Facebook Live thing here. Next week we'll be talking about Chelsea's 5 new signings, says Joe. I like the positive attitude. It's the way to go. 5 new signings. All right. Nothing else will do. 5 new signings. You heard it here first. Thanks for watching. We'll see you after 5 new signings or next week, whichever comes first.